It's that time of the year again, and every year I have tried to do Advent of Code. I usually pick a different language, and I try to learn a new language with Advent of Code. That goes really well at first, and then we get into day 10, day 11, where the problems start to get pretty complicated, and I usually don't find it worth the effort anymore. For me to continue doing this in like Clojure or F# or something that is new to me, it would take me multiple hours a day. And it just doesn't seem worth it. So I thought about doing it in JavaScript or TypeScript this year and just going through it. But I also had another idea that was, instead of doing the Advent of Code like I usually do, what I would do instead is each day work on a Flutter application and not stream the whole thing, but record the whole thing, maybe stream some of it, I'm not sure yet, and share it for you all on YouTube. And the idea here is I'm not going to open source the code, but if you follow along step by step, you can build the exact same app. Like I will not do anything for this project off recording, and then you can follow along at your own pace and build the same application. It's something I want to ship by the end of December, so it's not going to be anything crazy, but it is a project that I want personally as well. So I have a name for it. We'll get to that in a second. But the project is really simple. I would like to have an application that every day gives me a philosophical quote. That's my dog back there. She's putting her paw on a keyboard. Anyways, so we'll have this application that has a philosophical quote. And it will just prompt you to write your thoughts about that quote. So a journaling exercise, somewhat similar to like the Daily Stoic book by Ryan Holiday, but not specifically tied to Stoicism. And then also I would like for you to be able to, once you fill out your thoughts on that quote, be able to see your previous thoughts on that quote last time it came around. So I've got 90-ish quotes in a CSV that I'm working with, and we'll start there. And the idea is once you hit the 90th quote, they rotate and they go back to the beginning, and you'll be prompted to reflect on quote number 1 again. Once you do and put in your thoughts, you can see what you thought previously on the last iteration as well. The idea is to kind of reflect and grow and just expand our mind a little bit. This is a really great project, in my opinion. It's so fundamentally simple, but there's so much more we could do with it. Like, this is something I want daily interaction on, so we can do a daily push notification to prompt the user to, hey, it's time to reflect on this quote. So we'll look at setting up push notifications, not like Firebase push notifications per se, but just device triggered push notifications. So like kind of like an alarm or like a regularly scheduled push notification that doesn't involve a server-side component. The next part is it doesn't involve a server-side component, so it's easy. It's feasible to get knocked out in 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. The next thing is that we will use a couple Firebase pieces, specifically Crashlytics, maybe Analytics, just to make sure that we are not shipping a product that is broken for our users, but we won't do anything else. This keeps our privacy policy nice, so if you've been terrified of deploying an app because privacy policy lawyerism scares you, this will be pretty light. There won't be any form of authentication, no accounts, it all stays on your device. On top of that, we will leverage a database on your device to store your thoughts. I'm probably going to use Hive, but I haven't thought about that yet, too much about that yet. Also, if you're with me this far and you've seen some of my previous videos, this is way different already. You usually don't see my face or my Santa hat or my dogs. I am going to, in an effort to actually get this done and try to deliver pretty frequent videos for you all, I am going to trim down the editing a lot. So it'll be very raw. I have acquired a slightly quieter keyboard. This is what the old one sounds like. This is what the new one sounds like. Hopefully it's not too bothersome. On top of that, I didn't put out a video yesterday, and today's December 2nd, So we're going to do both today. What you got from me so far is what I planned on putting out yesterday. So we're going to go ahead and also get started today. So I mentioned we're going to use Flutter. I'm going to turn this video off so you can see my desktop. Pardon the mess. And we're going to open up a terminal. I have Flutter installed. I'm going to go ahead and pull up a browser. If you don't have Flutter installed, you'll have to install it. Most of my recurring subscribers are Flutter devs, some Go devs. So most of you probably have Flutter installed at this point, but flutter.dev will take you here. This is actually great. I'm going to go ahead and open the docs because I know we're going to need them. I'm going to go ahead and open pub.dev. This is the package manager website for Dart packages and Flutter packages. So this is kind of like NPM, but for the Dart ecosystem in Flutter. This is the Flutter documentation. We'll look at the widget catalog. There's actually a library that I am going to attempt to use, I think. We're going to wait on the UI a little bit. Where are you? This, New Brutalism. I really like the way this looks. That being said, I may try to keep it simple, like as simple as possible. We'll come to the UI when we get to that point, but we may end up using this too. Don't have mocks. We're going to wing it very much the developer way. And we're going to start with creating our Flutter project. So if you haven't installed Flutter yet, you'll install Flutter from flutter.dev. There's a get started button right here. If you click it, click one of these. I'm on Mac. Follow the steps. If you're using an M1 Mac, M2, M3, whatever the M's are, you will have to install Rosetta. If you haven't installed Rosetta, if you're in China, there's extra stuff you have to do. But yeah, follow these steps, get it installed, make sure it's on your path. At the end of those steps, you should be able to do flutter -- version, and it should tell you something like this. If you don't want to install Flutter directly, there's two really great tools. There's FVM, the Flutter Version Manager. This will help you manage different versions of Flutter, so you can have projects across multiple versions. You don't have to keep them all in sync, which is nice. Another one is ASDF. This is what I use. ASDF is a runtime manager. You can use it for everything. You can use it for Flutter via plugins. You can use it for Node, you can use it for Go, you can use it for all sorts of stuff. It's really nice. But again, this is out of the scope of this video, but that's what I use. So there is a chance that I might have to do some stuff in ASDF to set up our project, but probably not. Great. So actually, one more thing. If you do go through ASDF, you'll need a plugin for Flutter because it's not supported by default. There is ASDF Flutter. We'll take you to a GitHub repo. This is the one I use. It's fine. It's very easy. Install ASDF, use this, and then follow these steps because your VS Code will yell at you because it can't find Flutter. It's fine. Totally normal. It is what it is. Let's get started. Okay, so if you are new to Flutter, which again, I'm assuming most of you aren't, but just in case, the Flutter tool has this wonderful help command. I'm going to make this a little bigger so we can see everything. Great. So if you type Flutter help, you can get a lot of information. Flutter is a very big tool. It's very robust. And you can see there's stuff specifically to the SDK here, like Flutter Doctor. You might be asked to run this if you're running into issues and you post an issue on GitHub. This just gives way more information about your installed versions of Flutter. Specific project stuff like running the project, testing. We're actually going to use VS Code for almost all of this, so that won't be anything too complicated. But right here is create. We're going to use this to create a new project. We're also going to run -- help so you can look at some of the options here. Specifically, if you're starting a new project on your own, one thing you might want to look at are these templates. There are several templates. This one's really nice. If you are using a list view, detail view, this used to be called master detail view, but this is, the name's changed for a lot of really great reasons. But the idea here is that if you have a list and you tap on an item and it opens up a new screen with that item's details, but on tablet, it is a list on the left 1/3 of the screen, and then on the right 1/3 of the screen, or 2/3 of the screen, sorry, there's a view host, and then whenever you tap on an item in that list, it puts the details in the view host. It's responsive, it can be adaptive, it's a really great template to start from, but we're not going to start from it. We're going to start from scratch. There's additional stuff up here you can do, like overwriting existing files, description of the Flutter project. We'll set that manually. But yeah, so let's go ahead and start. We'll do Flutter create. So many options. So we'll do Flutter create. What do we want to call this? Oh yeah, the name. This is called Philosopher's Stone. And we will do our best to make sure Harry Potter doesn't try to sue us. Great, so I've CD'd into this directory. We have a lot of different directories. I'll talk through these really quick and then we'll actually get started with some code. Android, this is your stuff for building on Android. iOS, stuff for building on iOS. Linux, same thing for Linux. Mac, same thing for Mac. You can build Mac desktop applications with Flutter, really nice. Same with Linux, same with Windows. Web, you can build web-ish applications with Flutter. They're going to be Canvas, so like Flutter takes care of most of the heavy lifting of using Canvas in this case, so it works out fairly nice. But it's not. If you go to a website and it's maybe not what you're expecting on the web at this point. They're working on making that better, and it is really good. It's so much better than it was 2 years ago. But it's just something to be aware of. It's still in a bit of a weird spot. This test directory, this is where tests will live. If we have time, we'll write some tests. Why not? Lib, this is where our library lives. This is where our Flutter application lives. Our pub spec, this is like our package JSON, or kind of like our Go mod file. This is a lock file, so this has way more information and specifics to make sure that when we install via pub, we're installing the exact versions that we used last time. Okay, that's a lot to talk about. Let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to hit code and then dot. That's going to open up VS Code. If you don't have that set up, just open up VS Code, go to open folder, and then add this folder. I have a bunch of plugins. You only need one. The one you need, Flutter. So if you don't have this installed, go ahead and install it. There's documentation, there's installation steps. I'm not going to go through these. In theory, you just install this and it works. If you used ASDF in that plugin, make sure that you ran this step. But in theory, this should just work. If it doesn't, file an issue, follow the troubleshooting steps. It's a little out of the scope for this video. Okay, so now that we have this going, I'm going to open up main.dart. Now that I have main.dart open, there's a couple things going on here. Let's go ahead and see what it looks like first. So in our VS Code, in the top right, there's this little icon that says Start Debugging. Let me make this bigger. Okay. Okay. I'll manage. It's a little too big for me, but it'll make it easier to read. Great. So if we click this icon in the top right with like a little play button and a bug, it says Start Debugging. This bar will pop up. We'll use this bar in just a moment. I'm actually running this on Mac OS right now. I don't want to do that. In fact, it actually looks like there may be a bug with that. So I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to, if you click on where it says macOS Darwin, you can choose your emulators that you have set up. You might not have any emulators set up. If you don't have an iOS simulator, you need to install Xcode. This takes a while. You have to install it from Apple. You can either install it from the App Store, or if you're on a beta version of the OS, you have to install it from Xcode downloads. There is, yeah, right here. Downloads and resources, Xcode 15 beta. You'll install that, and that'll give you, run it, run through all the steps to get started, and then that'll give you the option to use an iOS simulator. You can install ADB in the Android tools to get Android emulators. If that's complicated, it is. And you don't want it to be complicated, you can install Android Studio. Android Studio is by JetBrains. It's completely free. It's actually a really nice IDE. It's just a little meaty for my liking. And now it's called Hedgehog. That's cute. But as part of this, you will be able to install different Android emulators in Android Studio. Actually, I do still have it installed too, because there are a couple things that Android Studio just makes really nice, specifically icon generation, working with certain resources, etc., and a lot of build analysis. So there's a chance we may use that. We probably won't. This project should be simple enough that we won't need to dig into most of that stuff. But either way, now that we have those installed, I'm going to start the iOS simulator. I'm also going to take a sip of my coffee while this loads, so pardon the noise. Okay, awesome. I just realized I haven't checked this video to make sure that it's recording properly, so I really hope it is recording properly. Okay, so you'll notice this is an iPhone 6s Plus. This is an old iPhone. If we want to use a newer one, we can click on the simulator down here. We can go to File, Open Simulator, iOS. I'm going to do an iPhone 15 Pro. This will give us a new emulator. I'm going to close the other because my computer can only handle so much. We'll let this finish, and once this finishes booting, this will change down here in the bottom right corner. Again, it says macOS Darwin right now, but it's about to say iPhone 15 Pro. Once it does, we'll be able to run our application on this device. Again, taking another sip of coffee. Okay, it's booted. Let's go back to VS Code. I'm going to hit macOS Darwin. Right here you can see iPhone 15 Pro. This is the device ID. We don't really need to know this, but if you're running this from the command line, you will have to use the device ID. VS Code takes care of this for us. I'm also going to get rid of this Gradle pop-up. So now that we've selected iPhone 15 Pro, we can hit Run. You see down here it says Flutter launching. This will take a second. Oh, it might take quite a few seconds. I didn't realize the phone was still booting up. While this is booting up, one thing to be aware of, I learned this with the game that I built recently. The iOS simulator is a simulator, not an emulator. It doesn't have access to a camera, which was relevant for the game that I was building. So I had to test on my physical iOS device, test that functionality on my physical iOS device. And then I also used an Android emulator for testing it on the go. So the Android emulator has a fake camera environment where you can add things to the environment and then rotate around and scan different things and take pictures of different things. It's really nice. iOS doesn't have that, so if you end up doing something with cameras or other like core device features, just keep in mind that the iOS one is a simulator, not an emulator. My goodness, this is taking a minute. Come on. I guess the benefit of streaming this would be that if people had questions, I could use this time to answer questions. Oh, so the Xcode build is done. That's good. Okay, perfect. Okay, this is what you get out of the box with Flutter, with no template. If you use templates, you might get some different stuff. This is Material 3, which is really nice. This is not a circle. This used to be a circle with Material 2. And what you get out of the box is an application that every time you click this counter, it tells you how many times you've pushed the button. That's it. It's nice to see this on the screen first because this proves that our Flutter installation is fine. We have not written any code that could be wrong. This is just what it ships with out of the box. Now that we've seen this, let's go ahead and start gutting some of this. There's a bunch of information about comments. I'm going to go ahead and gut those. We'll change a couple things just so you can see some of the nice parts of Flutter. So if you save, there's a little thing that says hot reloading that popped up. You notice that our state didn't change here. We still have 10. If we click it again, it goes to 11. That's awesome. But we can make some pretty wide changes. So if we don't want to do deep purple and we want to do orange, we hit save, and now everything's orange. I kind of like this color. Maybe we'll do material with orange. Who knows? Theme data is application-wide generally. It doesn't have to be, but how it's being used in the material app makes it application-wide theming information, so colors, fonts, that type of stuff. Material app is it's kind of like a host. There's a lot of stuff that can go into this. If you want to do navigation with routes, we probably won't. I don't think we need them. You would do it here. Home is the view that you want to show. So if I command click on my home page, it takes me down the file to this new widget. It's a stateful widget called my home page. You can see that it takes in a title and it creates state. This is my home page state. So this state is, you can think kind of this stateful widget as the harness, and this state being the actual widget tree itself. So these are components, widgets, whatever you want to call them. Flutter calls them widgets. And then there's state associated with those widgets. So specifically in our case, there's a counter, and there's this method that we've written, or Flutter has written for us, called increment counter. It calls set state, and all that does is update the counter. Updating the counter itself won't trigger a re-render. You have to call set state. You shouldn't do this, but you can. You can update the counter outside of set state and then call set state with nothing inside of it. There's a lot of reasons why you don't want to do that and why you want to set state here. But conversely, you also want to set state and keep this as thin as possible. You don't want to do heavy complications here. Like, for example, if you're trying to pick an item from a list of 1 million items, do that here and not in here. If you do it here, you might not have jank. If you do it here, you will almost certainly have jank. And jank is like when the screen is not 60 FPS and it's choppy and laggy, that type of experience, if you're unfamiliar with that. Okay, so now that we're in here, let's mess around with the state a little bit so you can kind of see what's going on. So you can see that we use theme of context. This takes in a context, which comes from this build method, and theme of context is going to reach all the way up to our theme, which is right up here. You can see that our seed color is orange, and down here we're using the inverse primary color, which gives us this color. That gives us this color. That's the background for the app bar. What if we want to change it and we don't want to use part of our theme? Well, we can do that. We can do colors dot, let's do blue gray. Now if we save this, you can see that it's updated here, but this one stays the same. I'm going to revert this. You can see that title that gets passed into the widget right here is used right here, widget.title. It's used for the text for the title, which is this. We can change this and say, you know, my app. Oops, sorry, we can't. This is one thing that took me a minute when I was first starting with Flutter. You can't just use a string, you have to use a text widget. Part of this is the flexibility that Flutter adds. If we don't want to use a text widget, we could technically use an image as our title. We could use icons as our title. We could use, you could use a list as a list view as your title. I don't know how that would look. I wouldn't recommend it, but the point that I'm getting at is everything in Flutter is widgets, and that allows Flutter to be really, really flexible. So if we change this to Philosopher's Stone and save, you can see that it updates here. That's great, but what they had in place is actually a really good pattern, which is taking the title from that widget. So I've reset this, but if we come back up here, we can see that the title's Flutter Demo Homepage. So let's change this to Philosopher's Stone. Okay, great. We'll leave everything else that you see so far as it is for right now. I don't really want to start on the design yet. I really want to start on working with these quotes. So I'm going to go ahead and add a couple different things. I'm going to pull up numbers, which is where I have my quotes saved. And I'm also going to pull up some documentation because this is not something I've needed to do before. Kind of neat. I've been doing Flutter for about 3 years, and I still run into things that are new. Like Flutter supports so many things that I have not done them all yet. So I've worked with assets, and that's what we're going to do. But I specifically want asset read file. Let's see if this helps. Yeah, loading text assets. Sweet. So I've used assets in the past for a lot of images and things of that nature. This is great, but we actually want to make this just serve a text file. So what we're going to do, we have this philosopher quotes list that I've came up with some hits from people like Marcus Aurelius, my main man Seneca, a lot of people. We have 95 quotes right now and an empty row for some reason, and I'm just going to go ahead and delete that so we don't have to worry about it. Great. So I want to take this and I'm going to export to CSV. I'm going to hit save. And I want to take this and put this in that new project that we just created. So Philosopher's Stone. There's not an assets directory. So what I'm going to do is under Philosopher's Stone, I'm going to create a new folder called assets. And then I'm going to name this quotes.csv, and we'll export this. You can use whatever you want for these quotes. I hadn't really thought about this part so far. I just sourced these from books, from some of my favorite areas on the internet, quite a few different things. So you can come up with your own quotes. You can use these. It doesn't really matter. And you also don't need all 95 to build this app. Okay, so we have an assets folder. VS Code's really kind and even gave it a specific color because to VS Code, assets means something particular. You can see our quotes are here. This is excellent. There's some things that are a little strange, like this one actually has quotation marks around it. This one doesn't. We'll have to do some normalizing. Oh, this is interesting too. I'm going to go ahead and manually remove that. I'm curious. Yeah, we have more. Some of these were sourced from the internet, and there seem to be consequences for it. Okay, no more spans. Yeah, okay, excellent. No more random HTML. Sweet. So we have this quotes. I'm going to go ahead and make a new module. Modules aren't specifically a Flutter thing. It's just a practice that I do. So I have a quotes module. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start with quote.dart. We're going to go ahead and create a class. This is a quote. A quote has a author. Oops, sorry, final string author. And has a final string quote. Or we'll just call it text. That way we don't have quote twice. We can do a couple different things here. So I'm going to do what we would call a constant constructor in Flutter. Constant constructors are really nice. This means that if we pass the same two arguments to a quote over and over again, it will only create it once in memory. This is really, really nice. That way we don't have to worry about excessive memory consumption or anything like that, and Flutter kind of takes care of, or Dart really takes care of it for us. I'm sorry, I want to give credit where credit is due, and that's all Dart. So now that we're here, I'm going to use this syntax so that these are named arguments. And now we have our two arguments. A caveat with the const quotes, or the const constructor, I should say, the properties have to be final. Final means they can't be changed after they've been set. In our case, that's fine. We're reading them from a file, so it's not like we're going to be changing them. So we have our quotes. I'm going to create another file called quote loader.dart. Generally, everything in Dart is a class. It's not entirely true. I mean, you can have first-class functions. You can have extension functions. There's a lot of flexibility there, but generally, the way that things tend to have manifested for me in the past are with classes. So we're going to use classes pretty extensively. We are using a pretty new version of Dart, so we do have access to like the interface keyword and some more fun things, but we'll keep this simple and also hopefully make it something that can work on most people's installed versions of Flutter. Sorry, I said quote darter. This is quote loader. Okay, so I was thinking that maybe we would do an abstract class to define what this looks like. Sure, let's do it. Why not? So we can do abstract interface class. Let's give it a name. I'm going to call it loader. So what does a loader do? A loader probably has a method called load. And this probably returns a future for when everything is loaded. And then we want these to be quotes. So we'll take in a generic up here, a generic T. And this will return a list of T. Okay, so how does that actually manifest? So now that we're here, we can say implements loader quote. Pulls in quote for us. We can use VS Code's help here to create one missing override. It adds this load method for us. This overrides the interface, which is great. This expects a future with a list of quotes. So now that we're here, we can go ahead and implement load. Let's do, I'm going to refer to our assets, or our documentation here, and see how they handle this. So generally, when you use images, you use an asset image, which is a widget that takes care of all this for you. It's really nice. In our case, we're outside of a widget context, and we don't have an asset bundle. So you can use the root bundle to directly load such assets. So in our case, we'll go ahead and take this. I like to keep our third-party imports above our first-party imports. So we have our root bundle here, and then the example they have is this. So I'm going to set this to a variable called CSV. This isn't the name of our file, so we're going to update ours to match our file. So it's in assets and it's quotes.csv. To use the await keyword here like this, we need to make this async. So we've made it async. Is warning us that we're not returning anything, which totally makes sense. We're not. So now that we've loaded our CSV, this could fail if this file doesn't exist. You might want to wrap this in a try catch. In our case, we'll leave it for now. We may come back to it. Sorry, I would want to make sure that we actually ship this by the end of the month, so we can maybe make decisions that might not be the best coding practices in the spirit of getting this shipped. I don't know. We'll see. If we run into issues, we'll come back and put it in a try catch. So we've loaded our CSV. Now that we have our CSV, we need to parse this really, right? So I'm going to make another class, quote parser. And what this is going to do is parse CSV. And the way this is going to work is it's going to take in a string CSV string. And this is going to return a list of quotes. Great. I'm trying to follow good programming practices still, like single responsibility and kind of breaking things apart. So we're going to continue to try to do that. In our case, we might end up with quite a few classes to help handle this, but I think you'll like how this turns out. So now we have this CSV string, and we want to parse it. So we know a couple different things. So we know that we can get our rows by running CSV string.split, and then we can give it a pattern. In our case, we want to split on new lines. This will give us all of our rows. Now that we have our rows, we can get all of our quotes. So we can say rows.map. We'll map over this. And we're going to turn these into quotes. So to do that, we are going to split again. We can use, can we use Dart destructuring? I don't think list destructuring is something we can do. Sorry, this is actually a somewhat new Dart functionality. Pattern AB. List with 2 fields. Yeah, let's try it. So we have author, and then we have, author, and then we have text. Are you mad at me because missing identifier, unexpected token? Oh, that's JavaScript. So I removed the arrow right there. Sorry, I've been writing a lot of TypeScript lately. And that's a key difference between Dart and TypeScript. In Dart, you don't have this arrow. In TypeScript, you do. Okay, so we want to take our row and we want to split our row. I'm going to rename this so it's not E and maybe something a little more informative. And then we want to split on a comma because they're CSVs. Now that we have this, we can return our quote. Come on. And our author is our author and our text is text. Perfect. So we've mapped this. That's awesome. We have all of our quotes. We have a list of them, and this should be working from our CSV. We just need to return rows.map. And then you'll notice this is an interesting thing. I run into this a lot. I'm sure most Dart devs do. This requires a list, and we are not returning a list. It tells us that we have an iterable. To solve that, we can convert it to a list. Or we could return an iterable here. In our case, we'll just convert it to a list. So now that we have our quote parser, I'm going to make this static. We can say quote parser dot parse CSV, and then we pass in our CSV. This returns a list of quotes. We already know that we're in a future because we're using async and await. So in theory, all we need to do now is just return quote parser parse CSV. Okay, now that we're here, let's go ahead and I really want to test this. So maybe we will write a test. Why not? Quote loader test.dart. I'm going to, I was going to steal this test format, but we don't want to do a widget test actually. Sorry, let me pull up some documentation, or maybe just an example from another project. Test container. Yeah, you're really light. Okay, perfect. That's what I thought. Okay, so we'll pull up test. And the reason that we're using this style of test instead of the one that came with our generated project, this test widgets inflates like a widget tester, and you have to pump widgets, and there's a lot of really interesting things. But the short and sweet is that this is used for component tests or widget tests. You can use it sort of for kind of end-to-end tests or integration tests. We just want unit tests. So we're just going to start with unit tests. I took this from another project that I have that's a pure Dart library. But I am just going to reduce it down to the bare minimum and give you time to walk through this with me so that we can make sure we're all on the same page. So let me remove all of this. This is really what we're looking at. The group, a name for the group. So we're going to call this quote loader. Should bind, so the test name, so in our case, should load quotes successfully. Ideally, you would cover scenarios like if the file doesn't exist and that type of stuff. Maybe we will. Maybe not. We'll kind of see where we go with this. We do need to add this test package to our pub spec. So this is the first time we've opened our pub spec. There's a lot of comments in here. This is essentially our package JSON for Flutter. If you're not familiar with your package JSON, it just has information about your project, the dependencies you use, and more. So in our case, we have a dev dependency on Flutter test, and it says SDK Flutter. That's where this is coming from. We need one more dependency, and that's going to be on the test package. You can see here that we have a dev dependency on test. I'm going to go ahead and pull this in. And then if I hit save, Flutter will automatically fetch that package for me. So now that that package has been fetched, we can come back in here and our red squiggles are gone, which is excellent. Now we can actually write our test. We'll wrap up here too for the day. This has kind of gone on a little longer than I expected, so I feel like this is a pretty good spot. So now that we have our quotes, we want to test our quote loader. So I'm going to split this to the right so we can refer to it as we are working on our tests. Okay, so we know we have a quote loader. So let's go ahead and create a quote loader. Final QL equals quote loader. In theory, this also could be static. We're not taking in any instance variables for this quote loader. It could save some memory by not doing up a class, perhaps. We might change that, but for now, we'll just leave it as is. And we know that when we type quote loader.load, we are expecting, final quotes equals, we're expecting quotes, right? We can make this async. I don't think we have to change anything for our tests there, but I will check. And then we want to make sure that quotes.length is, what'd we say, 95, right? I think that's right. So and we can hit run. This maybe isn't the most flexible test. If we removed a quote or add a quote, our test would fail, and really like the functionality is not changing. But I just want to get something going so that we can get a test working. We can clean the test up in just a minute. I clicked on the sidebar here. It says this is the testing sidebar. You can see your tests, you can run them here, see more information. I don't know why I didn't expect this, but this is totally reasonable. So we're using our binding, right? We saw right up here, we have a root bundle that is being bound. But we have not this is not running inside of run app, or we have not called this yet first. So what we need to do is call that method. So I'm gonna do, is it before each? Maybe, maybe not. It might not be before each. Dart test before each. Oh yeah, sorry, it's oh, it's not set up. What? This has been deprecated? Okay. Wait, why is that? Okay, it's not deprecated. Weird. Sorry, that was really confusing. VS Code was showing that it's deprecated, but it clearly wasn't. And then we need to import something from Flutter. There's widgets, there's material, and then there's Cupertino. Cupertino's iOS styling, material's material styling, the Google styling that we've all come to know and some of us maybe love. And then widgets, which is just the bare bones minimum that Dart needs to render Flutter stuff. Now that we have this installed or imported, we can call widgets flutter binding ensure initialized. Let's run this again, and we may get another error, but it shouldn't be the same error. Also, while this runs, I'm going to grab a sip of my coffee. Okay, great. Unable to load asset/quote CSV. This is a really interesting point. I know why this is happening, but earlier I said, well, let's not worry about a try-catch because we know this is always going to be here. And then our very first fully executing test proves that this is not always true. So what we're going to do is we're going to fix our test. We're going to fix our code so that it doesn't error, but it gives us a failing test. And the way we're going to do that's really easy. we're going to wrap this in a try catch. This is a file operation, and files may not exist. It's a good practice. It's something I was going to skip because I thought we wouldn't need to worry about it in such a small project. But yeah, files, especially depending on external files to exist, is like kind of a bad expectation. So in the case that we catch an error, we could log it, we can do a lot, but really what we need to do in this case to make sure that our method signature is still valid is that we need to return an empty list, and that should be good. Type list quote, yep, we're good. So let's run this again. It's going to fail, but it's going to fail because quote's length is not 95. And we'll solve that in just a second. Yep, okay, perfect. We expected length of 95. Actually, it's 0. How do we fix that? So in our pub spec, there is a section for assets right here. We have not added a single asset to our application yet. So we have an asset folder, but our application, sorry, is not aware of them. So what we can do, we have a couple different options. We want to uncomment this section, or you can delete it and write it yourself. And we can either do assets like this, and that will import everything in the asset folder, or you can do assets quotes.csv. Quotes.csv. So now that we've done that, Flutter will be aware of this asset bundle. Let's give this another run and see if this works. No, it did not work. Let's see what we are doing wrong. So we have quotes CSV. I'm curious if our test cannot be aware of our assets. So what we'll do, we'll click right here, and that'll give us a breakpoint. And the way that this is going to work is whenever we hit this state right here, we'll get a debugger that will allow us to look at the state of the running application. The catch is we can't hit run, we have to hit debug here. Okay, great, we're here. This means we can take a look at E. So you can see that there is a pattern matching error. Oh no. So let's take a look at that. Message pattern matching error. There's a stack trace right here. This isn't super helpful. Bad state pattern matching error. I haven't seen this before. So we can see that it comes from line 24.dart, which is right down here. Oh, okay. That's our issue then, right? So this is fine. We're loading the file, but we're finding, well, presumably we're loading the file. Let's find out. I'm going to run this test one more time. And I've put another breakpoint right here. So we can take a look at row and see what's going on with row. I've hit debug. It's going to run the test. Great, we're right here. So let's take a look at row, shall we? Author, quote. Okay, that's kind of what I expected. Okay, it continues to be fine. Okay, continues to be good. I'm going to keep clicking. Oh, okay, we had our error, right? So it was the third quote. So I'm curious, what's the issue with the third quote? I bet it's quotation marks. Perhaps it is. Marcus Aurelius. Oh no, there's an extra comma. So we'll have to handle that too, right? These quotes can have commas in them too. So CSV is maybe not the best solution. So we have a couple options on how we can handle this, right? So we can do CSV with a custom separator. So in this case, we could do something like this as the separator, and that will not appear in any of the quotes, presumably, unless there's a really weird quote. Or we can try to parse this differently. I think for the sake of simplicity, what I would probably recommend doing is using a custom separator. So I'm going to go ahead and open up numbers again, and we're going to not do that. I guess another option too, in full transparency, would be to use a CSV parsing library that is actually like a little more robust and not just expecting to split on commas. Another option is you could write a regular expression here that only splits on commas that aren't within quotes. You could, is split first an option? It's not. What are other options? Replace first. You know what? This is going to sound a little weird. Let's actually take this approach. I'd rather not just add random extra separators. So I am going to do that, but it's going to be in code. So what we're doing here is we are replacing that very first comma with OR bars, and then we're going to split on the OR bars. I know it's a little weird, but the idea here is that this will convert to an OR bar since it's the first one in each row, and then this will be left alone, and we won't have to worry about that. Let's give it a shot. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this test from running since it's in the middle of executing. We're going to call it run, not debug, just run this time. We got the green check, which means that our tests passed. Technically, this is a broken test. So if we look at quotes, we can see that there are indeed 95 lines, but this very first one is not a quote or an author. It's literally the word author and literally the word quote. Let's fix that. So we actually know that 95 is not valid. It should be 94. And we can expect quotes sub 0 dot author to not equal the word author. There are also other ways to write more robust expectations here, using something called matchers. So this would be like to not equal or to be less than or equal to. There are a lot of matchers, but we'll just keep it simple and do basic expectations. And we want this to not equal quote, literally the word quote. So now that we've done this, if we run it again, our test should fail because these are not true. Like these are not the case that we're experiencing. So what we can do is a couple different things. We can ignore the very first item, which seems good. We can also try to filter out crap data. I like that approach. Sorry, it's not filter, it's where. So where element.author is not equal to author, or element.quote, or sorry, .text is not equal to quote. This is nice because, you know, this is a little more robust than just saying, I just ignore the first one. This is saying ignore anything where it's kind of bad data. And in theory, if we ever ran into a scenario where we had more bad data, we could expand this function to include those other scenarios where author is empty, it's an empty string, or quote is an empty string. It's just a little bit more robust as we go forward. So now that we've added this where, that'll filter out the items that don't meet the scenario. Or sorry, it will let pass the items that do meet this scenario. So it'll filter out the ones that don't. We can run our test again. And we expected 94, but got 95. Why is that? Author is not equal to author. Quote is not equal to quote. Interesting. What did I do wrong? I'm going to add a debugger right here in the test, which is another nice thing you can do with Dart. Oh, I'd like to debug, please. Oh, that's weird. It's not happy about that at all. Debug test. It's like a weird VS Code bug that this text isn't clickable. Okay, cool. So we get here. So we can look at our quotes. And you can see that our very first one is author. A-U-T-H-O-R. Interesting. What did I do wrong? And the text is quote. This one passes? Did I didn't forget to save, did I? Interesting. Let's debug. And then we'll wrap this up. Sorry, I know I said that earlier. This is taking quite a bit longer than I expected. So loading quote successfully. I'm going to hit debug here again, and we have a debugger right in this where statement. So let's see what the where statement's given us. Okay, so it gave us two lists. Rows. Okay, so it didn't get dropped in on that. So I've noticed this is something that I kind of run into when I do these shorthand functions with the arrow in Dart. I sometimes forget where the debugger needs to go. So I think I need to bring it up a line. So we'll try that. Okay, it's running. Okay. So we have our rows here. We can use this to step over. In our case, though, I think we want to step into. No, we did not want to step into. Sorry, using the debugger is actually probably one of my weakest spots. Let's try this one more time. Step over? No, it did not. Okay. This is unfortunately a little bit painful, but what we can do is we can convert this to an arrow function. We can return this, add a semicolon here, add a debugger right here, and I know that will work as expected. Little unfortunate, but at least it's a working solution. Okay, great. We're here. We can take a look at this. Element author is not equal to A-U-T-H-O-R. Or element.text is not equal to quote. So if we look at element, you can see that text is quote, author is author. This is really weird. Why is this yellow, but this one's not? That is strange. And you can see here, these are working as expected for the rest of them. We'll also have some cleanup that we need to do too, which is exciting, but we can do that later, I suppose. That'll be a good thing to pick up with tomorrow, actually. Author. Humor me for a second. Let's only let through these. Test is running. We only got one. Okay, which is great. That makes sense. I am immediately aware of my issue in this case. Let's try this. Yeah, okay. Bad conditionals. So in our case, sorry, that's so silly that I spent so much time on that, but it happens. So in our case, bad conditionals, we were checking if the author was not equal to author or the text was not equal to quote. And we needed to check that both of them were not equal instead of an or. So now that we've done this, we can see that we get 94. Our first author is not the word author. Our first text is not the word quote. So we're in a really good spot. What is interesting about this is we have another scenario where one of our quotes is has a quotation mark in the quote. And we don't want those. We want to doctor this so that this is pretty consistent, right? So in our case, it would be weird if some of these show the quotation mark and some don't. We might show a quotation mark in the UI, but we don't need it in our data. So we'll clean up our data after that, and we'll clean it up in code because that's what we're here to do. So that's going to be it for today. This is taking a little more than expected. Hopefully people are ready to kind of dig into this and you feel prepared to move forward with the next project, the next part of our project. I'm imagining we will be in a scenario where we get the quote stuff taken care of tomorrow and we probably start on rendering quotes to the UI. We'll write a hashing function that looks at the current date and determines a value from that date, and then we'll hash that into a quote so we know which quote to load. That way you don't necessarily always get a new quote. You won't progress the quote counter every day you check the app. You will get a new quote every day regardless of whether you check it or not. There's a lot of benefits to that, but we can talk about that next time too. Besides that, we'll look at storing things in Hive. I think we probably will use maybe like a bottom sheet to record our thoughts, and then possibly use another bottom sheet to look at our previous thoughts on those quotes too. So I'm excited. Hopefully you are too. Let's knock this out over the course of the next couple weeks. Thank you for your time. I'm Brad Seipert, and I hope you learned something today.